Good evening. Welcome to Loyola University's 8th Grand Seminar Lecture. I'm Amanda Thomas, Loyola's Interim Vice President for Academic Affairs. We have been looking forward to welcoming you to our campus today for this chance to highlight our natural and applied science programs. The Natural and Applied Sciences Grand Seminar was created to bring speakers and topical subjects related to the natural and applied sciences to the entire Loyola community for students and faculty from all disciplines to appreciate and enjoy. Each year, the Grand Seminar discusses a science topic that is of interest to natural and applied science students and faculty as well as the larger community. The Grand Seminar is just one of the many programs and initiatives Loyola has launched to affirm and advance our commitment to the role that the sciences play in a Jesuit liberal arts education. We have many institutional values here at Loyola, including academic excellence, intellectual rigor, and justice. One aspect of justice is environmental sustainability, most recently highlighted in Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si, Care for Our Common Home. There is much to be excited about in the STEM fields and specifically at Loyola today, and I'm delighted that you have joined us for this celebration. Tonight, we are honored to welcome Dr. John Warner, co-founder of the field of green chemistry and the winner of the prestigious Perkin Medal in 2014. To introduce Dr. Warner, I welcome Dr. Bar Rugani, Associate Dean for the Natural and Applied Sciences. Dr. Rugani.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas, and thank you to all students, faculty, staff, alumni, and guests for joining us this evening. Every year, we work hard to bring to campus a speaker who can both challenge and inspire us. This fall, we are honored and delighted to have Dr. John Warner with us. One of the two founders of the field of green chemistry, Dr. Warner started in 2007 the Warner Babcock Institute for Green Chemistry, which is a research organization developing green chemistry technologies. He serves as President and Chief Technology Officer. He also founded Beyond Benign, a nonprofit dedicated to sustainability and green chemistry education. Dr. Warner is the recipient of 2014 Perkin Medal, widely acknowledged as the highest honor in American industrial chemistry, and was named a 2016 American Association for Advancement of Science Lemelson Invention Ambassador, and received a 2004 Presidential Award for Excellence in Science Mentoring, which is considered to one of the highest awards for American science education. He also received the Council of Science Society President's 2008 Leadership Award, in addition to publishing nearly 300 patents, papers, and books. Dr. Warner is co-author to the defining text, Green Chemistry, Theory and Practice, with Paul Anastas. His recent work in the fields of pharmaceutical, personal care products, solar energy, and construction and paving materials are examples of how green chemistry principles can be immediately incorporated into commercially relevant applications. Dr. Warner was named by ICIS as one of the most influential people impacting the global chemical industries. In 2011, he was elected as Fellow of the American Chemical Society and named one of the 25 visionaries changing the world. He received his bachelor's degree in chemistry from UMass Boston and his Ph.D. in chemistry from Princeton University. Tonight, we are honored to have him here with us at Loyola University while he's wearing green Loyola University t-shirt. Please join me giving him a warm welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Professor Brown, and for this wonderful invitation and to spend some time with you. I got up at 4 o'clock this morning and took Amtrak from Boston, but I seem to have left my voice up in Boston, so I'll do the best that I can to project in a very loud way. It's been wonderful spending the last few hours here and wandering around the campus and seeing the posters, and just what an amazing place this place is. I'm just so honored to be able to have a small part to play in this wonderful university with such great faculty and students. What I wanted to do today is to kind of give you an idea of green chemistry. I wish that, the word green has images that pop into people's minds, and chemistry has interesting images that pop into people's minds. I'd love to give like a questionnaire and ask everyone what they think green chemistry is before the talk and after the talk. And if that has changed, then I've done my job. But it's interesting. Chemistry is a fascinating word. If I'm at a party and I'm hanging around and someone says, "What do you do?" and I say, "I'm a chemist," it's a conversation stopper, right? You can almost hear the music, and everyone stops, and then they start again. And it's a fascinating thing. But if you think about that reaction and how that manifests itself in the rest of our lives, in what products we buy, how we face the economy, how we face almost every decision in the materials world, it's almost a pretty big tragedy. So I've learned now, I don't call myself a chemist. I say I'm a molecular architect. And they go, "Oh, how interesting." But, we are in a super polarized world. And it's nowhere more prevalent than in chemistry and in materials and in toxicity. You open up the newspaper, you turn on the radio, you look on the internet, and you hear about this molecule is toxic, this molecule is bad, this molecule is scary, this one is dangerous, this one's hurting us, this one's bad, this one's bad. Oh my God, who in their right mind would want to be a chemist in 2017? Everything's so nasty. It's almost like that game Whack-A-Mole. You know the game Whack-A-Mole where the little guy comes up and you hit him with a hammer and another guy comes up? What is the mascot of the American Chemical Society? It's them all, right? And what do? We play, we say, "Oh, brominated flame retardants, whack. Oh, phthalates, whack. Oh, bisphenol A, whack." And we're exhausted because we have one subject comes up, we wrap our arms around it, but then another subject comes up, and we wrap our arms around it, but we're out of breath because we still haven't really figured out that one, and we're wondering, is this really scary, is this really dangerous, or is there a bunch of hype? And we just don't really know, but the next subject comes up. And it's not a game. This is really serious stuff, and we are not equipped as a society to address it in the way that we really should. And so let's accept as a fait accompli that there are, in fact, red dyes out there that are carcinogens. Let's accept that there are components in plastics that are endocrine disruptors. Right? What we got to do is we've got to agree, I'm having a little bit of trouble there, that we can't despair. Right? Despair does not solve problems, it sells. Obviously, we're in a world where despair sells. Can you imagine if Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King got up and said, "I have a nightmare"? Right? People would have written checks because despair sells, but no one would get up out of their seats and do anything. All right? It's not something, and so we've got to avoid this despair thing, and we've got to really think about it from a different perspective. So we've got to really ask ourselves, are we asking the right questions? Instead of saying, is this toxic, is this bad, is this scary, maybe a much more fundamental question that we should ask is, why would a chemist make a hazardous material in the first place? Isn't that really more basic? Why do we have this situation? So maybe instead of asking ourselves, how do we make molecules? Maybe the first question we should ask is, how do we make chemists? Right? Now, I'm not a historian, I'm not a sociologist, I'm a chemist, so maybe looking at the path that I took to become a chemist might be somewhat instrumental. As you can tell from my voice, I'm from the city of Quincy, Massachusetts, okay? I have, if I wasn't so hoarse from this thing going on in my chest, I sound like a Kennedy, okay? It's a very distinct thing. Now, Quincy, Massachusetts is the home of two presidents, John Adams and John Quincy Adams, not pronounced Quincy, which is an interesting little tidbit. But also, in my opinion, the most famous chemist that ever lived is R.B. Woodward, is from the city of Quincy. He would have gotten at least 3 Nobel Prizes if it was awarded posthumously. He got it for the synthesis of vitamin B12, and then Raoul Hoffman got it for the Woodward-Hoffman rules. You would think he would have probably gotten it if he was alive, where his name was first. And then E.J. Corey and a couple people got it for synthetic methodologies. He definitely would have got it for this. So really one of the most famous chemists. But I got to tell you, I was completely unaware that this person ever existed. I'm not some kid that grew up in with a chemistry set dreaming of science. I had no idea what any of this was. I come from a huge family, a big Sicilian German family. I had 42 first cousins within a 1-mile radius growing up. And we were carpenters and plumbers and electricians. We weren't into college. Or, we had a kind of a healthy fear of that whole thing. In fact, in my high school, when I took English on the 2nd floor, I thought that was higher education. I didn't know what any of this was. Now, all my friends, they were talking about going to college, and so I heard them. And so I came home one day and I told my parents, I want to go to college. My mother cried, my father got mad, and we agreed that I'd work full-time in the construction industry, I'd pay my own tuition, and I would go to UMass Boston. Just a little far away here. UMass Boston is like back then $200 a semester. But what horrified my family more than the fact I was going to college is what I went to college for. You see, I went to college as a music major, not as a scientist. And I played, it's kind of ironic, but wait for it. I played in a band called The Elements. Okay, now this isn't carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, okay? It's a Rubik's Cube, a glass ball. Okay, it was the late 70s. These were our elements, okay? And we were okay. We were playing every, 3 nights a week at the Best Worst dives in Boston. We had an agent. We had a recording contract. In fact, people my age might remember a band called Jay Giles. We were recording in the same studio as Jay Giles. And in fact, one Wednesday night at 2:30 in the morning, WFNX played one of our songs on the radio. So we were on the radio, but things felt good. Things felt like they were happening. And then disaster hit. And the drummer, my close friend, ended up getting leukemia. And over the course of 6 months, he passed away. And all of a sudden, my world is very different. All my time and energy spent in in music, and all of a sudden, it's gone. Now, at UMass Boston, like most universities, you had to take other classes. You had to take a math class. You had to take a foreign language. Had to take a science. Man, I had to take a science. What am I going to do? I kind of like biology, genetics, meiosis, mitosis. That seemed kind of interesting. And I love physics, astronomy, and subatomic particles. So I'm stuck. Oh, should I take biology? Should I take physics? Should I take biology? And so in a moment of indecision, I added them up, divided by 2. So I'll take chemistry. Not because I had any interest in chemistry, but I couldn't pick between biology and physics, and it seemed like a mathematical average. And so I took chemistry, all right? And so I'm taking chemistry as an undergraduate, just taking the class, hanging out. And one day this professor comes in, Professor Jean-Pierre Ansel, looks at me, music major, walks by, and goes to the student next to me, my friend, and goes, he was a chemistry major, would you like to do research in my lab? I overheard the conversation. I've got time on my hands. I'm trying to think what I'm going to do. And I say, can I come? And I followed him into the research lab. And I got to tell you, everything changed once I understood what research was. All my life, I thought there were 2 types of people. There was artists and there were scientists, and never the twain shall meet. And because I was marginally good at music, I was an artist. But when I saw that scientists made things and created things, I immediately saw things very differently. I realized that the word art and the word science are just human constructs. In the process of bringing something into existence that didn't exist before, those words are irrelevant. I imagine ramming my brain full of electrodes and composing a piece of music on a keyboard or designing a molecule. And I said, I bet you the same blitz would happen, the same neurological activity. And I fell in love with chemistry. And the next thing you know, I published 5 papers as an undergraduate, spoke at the National Academy of Sciences in Washington. In fact, I made the cover of Celebrity magazine with Boy George. Now, with that, not as a musician, all right? One day my phone rings at home, and some dude says, John, why don't we consider you Boston's best and brightest college graduate? We want to do a story on you. I said, no, I have the phone. And a couple minutes later, they called me, no, really, we want to do it. And I go, really? And I hung up the phone. And the next day, I'm working construction. I wasn't as snappy dressed back then as I am now. I'm working in my lab. I'm unshaved, and the chancellor of the university comes walking and bangs on the door and goes, you will go get your pick. And they grab me kicking and screaming, and here I am, all these snappy dressed people, and I'm their hating wife as they do this story on this kid who synthesized over 100 molecules that have never existed in the world before, putting atoms in unique geometries that no one ever intended. And I'm reading this thing. I'm a chemist. How did that happen? It's really kind of strange. And flotsam and jetsam, the next thing you know, I find myself at Princeton becoming a medicinal chemist. Worked with Professor E.C. Taylor, the most amazing guy, and I worked on anti-cancer chemotherapy. Well, for people that are into it in the audience, the hydrofolate reductase GR transformase inhibitors, and ended up ultimately making this drug called Alimta that is now sold by the Eli Lilly company. Now, I played a very small role. There were 100 people working on this thing. But if you've been to the Princeton campus lately, there's a 7-story chemistry building built entirely on the proceeds of this one drug. So Princeton's pretty happy about this thing. And just to show how science and society can be weird, I lost my mom in 2001 to cancer, receiving the drug that I had helped design 15 years earlier. So the relationship between science and society was kind of interesting. This is my dad on graduation. I never told him I was a graduate student. He would have killed me. I told him I was an apprentice. Okay, and so he came, and he's in my lab, and he's looking, and he's kind of looking at a telephone, a different version than this one here. But one day I'm working in the lab, and the phone rings. And it's a senior corporate officer from the Polaroid Corporation. You know Polaroid, the instant photography. This guy named Lloyd Taylor. Okay, Polaroid, wow. Instant photography, Edwin Land. This was like really kind of cool. Bell Labs in the 80s had kind of gone away, and Polaroid had emerged. It's probably one of the coolest places to work as a chemist. And this guy's kind of creeping me out. He goes, John, I remember when you were on Celebrity magazine. I remember you at the National Academy. I'm thinking he's a stalker. He goes, let's have lunch. I told 6 people where I was going and when I'd come back. And I go and I have lunch with him. And at lunch, he offers me the job to head exploratory research at Polaroid. Dude, I'm 24 years old. I already had 2 academic appointments to be a medicinal chemist in academia. I'm going to be an academic. He tells me how much he's going to pay me. I say, when do I start? And all of a sudden, I'm an industrial chemist at Polaroid. Edwin Land got the Perkin Medal in 1974. How cool is that? Then they gave it to me, so how cool is that, really? But I was blessed to have this great group of people and just got tons of patents in holography and medical diagnostics and a bunch of different things. I was blessed to have so many good people helping me there. But one of the things that happened while I was there, was very introspective. Here I'm a medicinal chemist in a material science company like Polaroid. What would I do? So I started thinking about it and saying, oftentimes organizations will have like a skills assessment. They'll send people out to take tests and find what you're good at and what you're not good at. So this person, hey, I'm good at math. And this person, oh, I'm good at communication. An unwise organization sends people out to repair their deficiencies. They say the person that's good at math that doesn't like to communicate, take a workshop on communications, and takes the person that doesn't like math. But you know what? That's probably the wrong thing to do, because then what ends up happening is everybody's miserable doing what they don't like to do, and it just doesn't work out. A wise organization says, hey, if you like math, you should do more of it. If you like to communicate, you should do more, and you should collaborate. And if you collaborate, everybody's happy doing what they love. Okay, fair enough. What I realized is we've never figured that out in chemistry. In chemistry, we make these island of Dr. Moreau molecules, where we've got this functional group gives us solubility, and this functional group gives us reactivity, and this functional group, and we make all these complicated molecules with all these things here. And I said, why not instead take an idea from nature? So what we humans do is, if we want to make a molecule like this hydroquinone more soluble, in organic chemistry, what I say is we do the methyl ethyl propyl butyl futyl game, and we try to make a synthetic molecule that changes one property, but by changing one, we've now changed something else. And so we go back and forth, and we make hundreds of molecules hoping to get just the right one. Nature doesn't do this. All right? So when we're doing this, what we're doing is we're controlling the way the molecules talk to each other versus the way the molecules talk to the environment. All right? And so we change the structure of the molecule to change that. Nature never does that. What nature does is a collaboration where inside a cell membrane, we got a bunch of different molecules that have each a different job. Nature doesn't make one super complicated molecule, but has many molecules collaborate together. So why not do the same thing? And so I created this science that I called non-covalent derivatization. I'm not going to kill you on this, but man, if you wanted me to, I could talk for probably 30 or 40 hours about this. I'm such a nerd. The license plate of my car is NCD. I really get into this, okay? And essentially, it's doing the same thing at the moment. And so, next thing you know, the photographic industry calls my invention Warner complexes. And it's just a way of controlling the rate at which things dissolve in a multi-layered system. Now, in the United States, if you go to manufacturing with something, you need to get EPA approval. You have to get what's called a low-volume exemption in a pre-manufacturing. There's TSCA. Okay, so this is now like 1989, 1990, before the internet, so we had to fill these bankers' boxes full of files and ship them down to Washington, D.C. to the EPA to get permission to do this. We waited, and we waited. And ultimately, the EPA rejected our application, not because of toxicity, not because of environmental things. They just said, small particles, are you crazy? Molecular complexes, are you high? They had no idea what I was talking about. So Polaroid stuck me on an airplane and sent me to Washington, D.C. to give a seminar on these things called Warner complexes. Probably the first time in my life I've been on an airplane. I've got a briefcase of overhead transparencies. I'm a little bit scared. I'm a little bit mad. I'm going to go talk to this guy at the EPA. And I find myself at the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics, Paul Anastas. He's the branch chief. Now, wait a minute. I know this guy. Remember the kid I followed into the lab when I was a music major? With him. I've known him since I was 11 years old. In fact, I was playing in a jazz band with him with his older brother. Hey, there's his older brother. There's me on the keyboard. There's my older brother. Awesome hair, by the way, my older brother's got there. And this guy here, actually, if you've been to Las Vegas, the dude who plays Rod Stewart in Legends of Rock at Las Vegas, it has nothing to do with this talk. I just thought that was kind of cool. So anyways, I could give Paul a dope slap upside the head and say, wait a minute, dude, we've been manufacturing this process for years with all these solvents, with all these reagents, with all these things, and now we have a process that is, aqueous, less energy, non-toxic. Shouldn't you be psyched about this? Shouldn't you be promoting this? Isn't this something that you should want? But wait a minute, if because it's different, you're giving me a hard time, isn't anything better for human health and the environment going to be different? And if EPA makes it difficult to do anything different, isn't that orthogonal to your very being? So hold that thought. At this exact moment in time, having these conversations in Washington with this technology that I invented, my career at Polaroid is going amazingly well, all right? Things are just happening. I'm probably going to be made vice president of research. My head is huge. I'm so, going like cool. When disaster hits again, and I lose my 2-year-old son, John, to a birth defect. My son John was born with a disease called biliary atresia, where his liver was completely detached from his intestines. He couldn't metabolize water-insoluble nutrients, and so he got surgery at birth, and by 2 years old, I lost him. Lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, I asked myself, I wonder if something I touched in the lab caused my son's birth defect. I wonder if something, heaven forbid, I got an award for caused my son's disease. Here I am, probably the most successful chemist on the planet, my age. And I can't answer that question. I'm familiar with books like Our Stolen Future that talk about the impacts of chemistry and stuff like that. And I realize at this point in my career, I probably have synthesized over 2,500 molecules that have never existed before in the world. Here I am, so successful, and I realized I've never had a class in toxicology. I've never had a class in environmental mechanisms. How could I be so successful, have no idea what makes a molecule toxic? So now I started looking. Well, gee whiz, if you look, there's all kinds of reports about impacts of chemistry on human health and the environment. Report after report. How is it possible that 4 years of undergraduate, 3.5 years of graduate school, I never had a discussion, never had a seminar, never had a class, never had a conversation about how do you look at a molecule and anticipate its impact on human health and the environment? Yeah, I knew how to label waste and what gloves to wear to keep the university out of trouble. But at an intellectual level, I had no relationship, I had no ability to answer the question, have I touched something that could have caused harm to my son? Every year in the United States, we graduate 15,000 undergraduates in chemistry, 3,000 master's degrees, and 3,000 Ph.D.s. In 2004, the first time in history, we graduated more chemists that were women than men. What could be more important to the field of chemistry than an understanding of mechanistic toxicology, reproductive hazards, and all of this? And yet there is not one university in the United States or the world that requires a chemist to ever have any training in what makes a molecule toxic, what makes a molecule hazardous. Why do we have red dyes that cause cancer? Why do we have plasticizers that cause birth defects? This is no epic battle of good and evil. This is an industry saying, "Wow, I have great technologies that are made." For some reason, the field of chemistry has not seen this as part of who we are. So Paul and I realized we needed a science, not a philosophy, not a movement, not a government policy, but a science where we had journals and textbooks and classes and conferences and workshops and create a science. And that is the birth of green chemistry. All right, a guy from Polaroid and a guy working at the EPA realizing that the way science works is to communicate results and to create a body of knowledge where people could talk about mechanistically how do you invent things that reduce impact on human health and the environment. And so one day Paul said, hey, let's write a book. I don't know why I said yes, but we wrote this book, and had I thought anyone was ever going to read this book, we would have written a better book. But it's like I'm stunned at just how the world has responded to this thing. These two kids from Quincy, it's been translated in over 15 different languages. In the last, 15 years, I feel like Forrest Gump. It's like anyone could have written this book. Okay, you turn the pages and you're waiting for something inspirational. And it's just, yep, that makes sense. And at the end, you go, okay. It just makes common sense. Gee whiz, a chemist should have some knowledge that when they begin to design a material, they should have a pathway to anticipate the potential harm on human health and the environment. Kind of makes sense. I don't know why it wasn't happened before. It just happened. So now in the last 20 years, I've been to over 45 countries. I'm meeting politicians. I'm meeting presidents. I'm meeting ministers. I'm meeting princes. I'm meeting people like Star Trek. Probably the most nervous with that one. But it's like, gee whiz, what gives here? This is just so straightforward. And so what I think is most important is the 12 principles of green chemistry that kind of are like a checklist. If someone engages inventing something new, this is kind of the things that they should check for. So it's not a government policy, it's not a philosophy, it is a mechanistic science of how you can correlate what is known in the field of toxicology and environmental health sciences, not after you make it, but before you make it. And so green chemistry to me is not the thought of making something better. It is the act of removing hazard from society. So yes, it has to have some environmental benefit, but that's not enough. If no one's using it, so what? So it has to have superior performance and it has to have superior cost. People need to want the technology independent of the environmental benefit so that the mechanisms of the economy work. And so for something to be green chemistry, it has superior performance, superior cost, and oh, by the way, it has some sustainability benefit. And if you accept that definition, there's no barriers. There's no one saying we don't want this. The problem is that we're inundated with examples of things that might have some environmental benefit, but they don't really work, and they're a little bit too expensive. And my belief is if government creates policies that force society to use technologies that don't really work and are too expensive, that is a failure of the chemical enterprises. We should get back in the lab and invent better. Because hypothetically, if an election changed the entire environmental policies of a company overnight, hypothetically, that's not a sustainable thing. But if the technology is what it is, it gives us true sustainability. So to me, this is a crisis of invention. This is an opportunity of chemistry. And so the biggest barrier to adoption isn't policies, it's the invention in the first place. So here I am at the top of my career, things are going great at Pollard, and I quit. And I went into academia. I was chair of chemistry, full professor of plastics engineering, director of biochemistry in the UMass system for 11 years, and I started the world's first Ph.D. program in green chemistry. Everything that's in a normal chemistry program, but I added a one-semester class in mechanistic toxicology. I added a one-semester class in environmental mechanisms. Added a one-semester class in law and policy. Over the next 11 years, over 120 students passed through this program. The average time it took one of those students to get a job in industry, 2 days. The longest any student graduating from this program looked for a job was 6 days because she turned down the first couple job offers. I've been out of academia for 10 years. I'm still getting phone calls from industry. John, you get anybody? It is a mistake to believe that there's any pushback from industry. Superior performance, superior cost, and oh, by the way, a navigation pathway through the regulatory systems. This is kind of a straightforward thing. All right? So of all the products and processes that we have in society today, the ceiling tiles, the carpeting, the electronics, I would say that maybe 10% escape scrutiny. 90% of everything we got has some problems. Maybe it's a big problem, maybe it's a little problem, but 90% of the stuff that we're working with, we need something better. Now, if you do what's called an alternatives assessment and seek somewhere in the supply chain a better technology, you'll be successful maybe 25% of the time. That means that right now in 2017, 65% of the technologies haven't been invented yet. Now, you could look at this and say, oh my God, this is scary. Or you could say, what better time in human history to be a chemist or be involved in the material sciences. The world needs us. Can you imagine an undergraduate student working on a technology, turning a traditional technology into a green chemistry technology? Hundreds of thousands of people they will never meet avoid being exposed to potentially hazardous materials. Why is it when we hear about toxins, when we hear about these things, we see chemistry as the cause? When in fact, chemistry is the only path to a solution. These people who want to do meaningful work and save the world, whatever that means, chemistry is not on the top of most of these people's lists. Then who's going to invent the new technologies to get us out of all these problems? What are we doing wrong that society doesn't get this? Chemists have always cared about human health and environment. This is not the birth of ethics, okay? The thing is, the paradigm shift is, when I was a music major, I asked the chemistry professor, is chemistry dangerous? If I get into chemistry, will I put myself or my future family at risk? Now think of the clairvoyance of that right there. His answer, though, you know what it was? If you're asking yourself that question, you should get another major. Oh, so I didn't have to know that question. Okay, I'm cool. But it's not that he was a bad guy. Chemistry has to be dangerous. Get over it. But it's okay because we wear gloves to protect our skin. We wear masks to protect our lungs. We wear goggles to protect our eyes. We install scrubbers and filters and smokestacks to protect the air, the land, and the sea. We got it covered. But on my first slide, all those disasters, they had it covered too. And the problem when you only depend on mitigating exposure is accidents happen. And so if green chemistry is a revolution, which I feel it is, it's shifting the focus. It's not creating ethics, but it's shifting the focus. Instead of being dependent on exposure, let's look at the intrinsic hazard. In the last 10 years, the fields of toxicology and environmental health sciences have taught us that we can look at molecules and better predict their impacts on human health and the environment. There is no magic green button. We can't tomorrow make a green world. Modern chemistry has been around for 220 years. This is going to take decades and decades and decades to really pull off. But the idea is to start. And to have that belief that we don't have to accept that chemistry must be dangerous. Chemistry must be dangerous today, but not tomorrow. And so if we can invent a better future, what could be better? So industry gets it. If industry has a nasty material or a safe material, the cost for storage, transportation, treatment, disposal, on and on and on and on, it just makes sense that you'd rather have the safe one. Interestingly enough, that last one, new employment recruitment, I think is one of the most important. One of my students got an EPA award, very prestigious award, and she gave a presentation to about 400 people down in Washington. At the end of the presentation, everyone applauded, but one guy in the audience, this honorary guy, he goes, "Don't you think having a degree in green chemistry is going to limit your career opportunities?" And he thought he was so smart. And she looked at him, she goes, "Dude, why would I want to work for a company that didn't want me doing green chemistry?" And he kind of shakes his head, at which point about 150 graduate students stand up and give a standing ovation. That's the moment. The next generation gets it. The next generation cares. We don't have to convince them. We need to give them the tools to do it. Okay? And so what I did is I went back to Abraham Lincoln's time and I tallied all the U.S. environmental regulations imposed by the federal government. Not a whole heck of a lot happened. In 1962, Rachel Carson published Silent Spring. It's the year I was born. And it's the birth of the modern environmental movement. Now, I'm a simple chemist. I'm not a mathematician or a statistician. But if I look at this long enough, I start to see a trend. All right? Environmental regulations happen a lot. It is one of the single biggest impediments to commercial success in U.S. in global industry. Unknowing what is the next regulation, what are the problems, is hampering our success. Do you know that DuPont, 3 years ago, DuPont's R&D budget was $1 billion a year? That same year, you know what their environmental compliance budget was? $1 billion. They spent the same amount of money inventing their future as they tried to keep consistent with all of these environmental regulations. So the CEO of DuPont says, from now on, I want all my scientists to only invent non-toxic, environmentally benign, non-regulated technologies. Not one of those scientists have had a class in toxicology. Not one of those scientists have invented. The mistake to be made is that we need to create the demand. The demand is there. We don't have the supply. We're not training the chemists to meet that demand. That's what we really got to wrap our hands around. These people that look at the economy, this Pike Research claims that in 2020, green chemistry is going to be a $100 billion industry. It actually already is. All right, so every company I'm aware of has a green chemistry initiative, and they're scratching their head saying, why do we got to teach our employees? Why aren't universities doing it? And so, my mom, my poor mom, my father was an electrician, so we had toolboxes all over the house. I think the silverware in our kitchen was in toolboxes, so I'm forced to think this way. The chemical enterprises has a toolbox. We have all these drawers, carbon-carbon bond-forming reactions, oxidations, reductions, you name it. If you can design a molecule, you can probably make it. But if you imagine a green chemistry toolbox that does the same transformations in a non-toxic, environmentally benign way, like I said, this is 90% empty. I believe that an individual, a company, a developing country will open the green chemistry toolbox first because it's most practical and pragmatic. The problem is, odds are the draw's going to be empty. And because of our fast-paced economy that everything has to happen in a quarter, they can't say, stop everything, let's invent a solution. There's some people think that, okay, next Tuesday at 2:30, I'm going to invent. That's not the way invention works, right? You could spend years trying that. So companies, individuals, developing countries can only close the green chemistry drawer, open up the traditional, say, how much is it going to cost for the gloves, for the masks, for the lawyers? We're going to have to do it and pass on that cost because we just don't got time. So the urgency here is to fill that toolbox. And I'm hoping I'm looking in this audience at people who are going to be responsible and have their names on some of these drawers in the future. Because, man, the world needs it. So, in 2004, I'm called the country's #1 science professor. I spend a half an hour in the Oval Office with President Bush. Very interesting meeting that I had there. And what do? I quit. I leave academia. Why would I leave academia? I'm doing so well. Well, the following thing happened. Because I'm an entertaining speaker and I have little quippy quotes, every time a writer is doing a story about the environment or something, they always ask me for a quote. And so when Canada banned Nalgene plastic bottles because of bisphenol A, they called me and asked me. So, being a good citizen, I pull into a parking lot as I'm talking on the phone. And as I'm talking on the phone, a pregnant woman comes out of the grocery store, and she's struggling with her bags and her keys, and she puts her cash register in her mouth. And I see that, and a neuron just pops in my head and goes, you know what drives me crazy? We're talking about drinking out of plastic bottles. Do you know that thermal cash register receipts have milligram quantities of free bisphenol A? That holding on to a cash register receipt for 30 seconds, you'll get more body exposure than a lifetime out of drinking out of plastic bottles. They go, calm down, John, Oh, this is a story about plastic bottles. But they mentioned in their article that John Warner reveals that there's bisphenol A in cash registers. Oh my goodness. What happens next? Hundreds of websites. John Warner reveals bisphenol A in cash register receipts. I spent a lifetime inventing technologies to try to improve. Nobody cares. The one time I accidentally identify a problem, I'm a hero. Look at this. I'm on point with Tom Ashbrook. In fact, I'm in this world-class journal on the same page as a cat pushing a shopping carriage. John Warner reveals bisphenol A. I'm holding this thing saying, time for a change, John. Okay? And so, flotsam and jetsam and a lot of luck and amazing things, I meet this guy named Jim Babcock, a very well-resourced individual. And I tell him, I want to create a new kind of organization that focuses just on invention. I want to make an invention factory and just invent things consistent with the principles of green chemistry, but with an eye on commercialization and pragmatism. And bless his heart, he gave it to me. I have, I pinch myself every day, except at the end of the month when I got to pay rent. I have a 100,000 square foot facility with every piece of chemistry equipment to synthesize molecules and polymers, engineering equipment to do coatings, fabricate plastics, and construct devices, and then all the stuff to analyze it. The best universities in the country get the same equipment in the chemistry and engineering departments of that under one roof. We got about 25 scientists, and all we do is invent. And so for the last 10, 11 years, I don't publish papers in journals anymore. I don't speak at technical conferences. We just put our nose to the grindstone, and we invent. And the Warner-Babcock Institute is kind of complicated, so I'll just go through it really, really quick. Most of what I do is contract invention. Over the last 10, 11 years, I've worked with over 100 companies. All right. Now, I will never put their logos up here and brag, look at me working. It's their business. If you search my 150 or so patents and see who they're assigned to, you can figure it out. But I feel that that's their science. I've given it to them. I'm not going to talk about that. We also have a lot of government grants. We have a NASA grant, a DOE grant, a DARPA grant, and a couple others. Cthulhu funding is Jim Babcock's investment firm, and we do a lot of stuff where we invent and license. But what we've done in the last just 4 years, so what I can talk to you about are the things we've done in the last 4 years that are ours, that we do, that we create. And the idea is that I have an idea in my head, I have a group of people to help me, and we invent it. And then once we get to a certain point, we figure out, are we going to license it to another company, or will we start our own company? And we now have a material science company where we have a wood product and an asphalt product. We have a pharmaceutical company where we have an oncology drug and a neuroscience drug. And then we have Beyond Benign, the nonprofit. And so just to kind of give you a feeling of what it means to do green chemistry invention, one thing we have is an Alzheimer's drug. This Alzheimer's drug is doing really well in preclinical trials with animal models, in which we've got the effective dose down to nanomolar quantities, where we have behavioral responses, and we have clinical data. Really, really exciting. We have an oncology program that's really, really exciting. We have a diabetes program. So there's a lot of pharma stuff going on. But what's really crazy is in the same lab, maybe even the same person that's doing the pharma stuff, we're working on asphalt. All right, in the United States, there's 1 billion miles of asphalt roads. 1 billion miles. And what happens is the sun and the air oxidize the surface, making it brittle and crack. So we have to dig up and replace every year about 10%. But because it's brittle and damaged, we can't reuse it. It goes into a landfill. Maybe 5 or 10% can be reused. So I had this crazy idea of coming up with an additive to allow you to reuse that which we were never using again. And so being a crazy, bold person, in November of 2013, we dug up my driveway. It was a perfectly good driveway. A few days before Thanksgiving, my wife's outraged, and these trucks come. I go to the plant. I use my additive. These 2 trucks come with asphalt, and the guys, they're laughing at me. They say, "John, you idiot. You know, it's 17 degrees Fahrenheit. You can't pave this cold a temperature. You're using 75% recycled content. We've never used more than 5. We're going to open up the trucks. A big hockey puck's going to fall on your front lawn, and we're going to drive away." I actually had someone from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation there with a clipboard. I go, "Okay, open it up." They open it up. It comes out like sand. The workers scream like school children, jump on their bulldozers. Here it is a couple weeks ago. Beautiful. It works. It not only does it allow you to use entire recycled material, but it lowers the processing temperature, so it extends the paving. We started a company called Collaborative Aggregates. I wanted to call the product Entropy Mix. I thought it was cool. Entropy. They said, "Oh, that'll never sell." So I said, "How about if we call it Delta S?" They go, "Oh, that'll be good." Don't tell them. All right? And so it's called Delta S, and now 37 states in the country have approved it for state roads. We're shipping tanker trucks all over the place, this technology. Idea in my head, 2 months later, paved my driveway, 7 months later, commercialized across the country. Now, That's kind of weird. If you think about it, this is me. Okay? I'm wearing a hard hat. I got boots. I got a shovel. In a steaming pile of asphalt, and my cell phone rings, and it's clinicians from Finland talking about my Alzheimer's drug and how the cognition studies are going really well. Now, some people would look at that and say, that seems funny, guy doing asphalt and neuroscience at the same time. But it isn't. My model of Alzheimer's is an organic polymer in the brain wraps around an inorganic particle. The drug I invented slips in the interface and controls the way it aggregates. What is asphalt? An organic polymer wrapped around an inorganic particle. Delta S is a small molecule that slips in the interface. It's the same thing. We get so caught up in our little boxes. I'm a medicinal chemist. I'm a cosmetic scientist. I'm a polymer chemist. A molecule doesn't know what industry it's in. And if we just look at the molecules, in the world there is a conservation of molecular mechanisms. And once we get that, we can work on a lot of different things at the same time. We have a formaldehyde-free wood composite technology. We did a 70-ton pilot-scale run of OSB lumber. It's the #1 building product in North America. And if you've heard on the stories about the FEMA trailers after Katrina or the lumber liquidators, the formaldehyde off-gassing. So this 70-ton pilot-scale run up in Edmonton, Canada, outperforms industry standard of the materials in cost and performance. Not a drop of formaldehyde, not a drop of MDI, truly green wood composite adhesive. Here's a crazy story, and I can't explain why these things happen, okay? But I'm thinking about insect sclerotization one day. That is the process in which a bug sheds its exoskeleton. When it does so, the exoskeleton can't grow with the bug. So it sheds, and over the course of a couple hours, it turns hard and black. I'm thinking about that, going, there's something in nature that goes from white to black. Well, people dye their hair, don't they? And so I'm looking, and this product here, Grecian formula, do you know what the key active ingredients in Grecian formula is? Lead tetraacetate. You can't buy a house in the United States with lead paint, but you can pour it on your head. Go figure. And so if you've seen the pictures of me for this talk, and then you look at me and go, okay, this is the guy's dad, where is the son? I was looking at it. It's a tyrosinase oxidative cascade where tyrosine gets oxidized. So I came up with a way of mimicking that. I don't grind up bugs. I mimic the chemistry, put it in a beaker, bought a bunch of gray hair, stuck it in, and it colored. Not only did it color, but what I realized, it restores the human pigment. So me being the grayest person in the building, I jump in the chair, say, hit me. And my hair goes back to exactly the color it was 30 years ago. Someone with black hair, hit her. It goes black. Someone with brown hair, hit her. What it does is it restores the human pigment. It's non-toxic, environmentally benign. It permanently colors the hair. It's a topical treatment. It won't wash out. It won't fade. It will grow out. But it actually knows your color. In the same way that your finger has a fingerprint, your hair has a hairprint. So Paul Hawken, famous author and sustainability licensed it, and 2 years ago started a company called Hairprint. It's been on sale for 2 years. If you act right now for $39.99, you can get a box, and they'll throw in a Ginsu knife, okay? And so this thing here, again, idea to commercialization in like 14 months, all right? We have this DNA mimicking. So there's a process in psoriasis in which you shine UV light in psoriatic cells, and what it does is it imposes I'm talking chemistry here to a lot of non-chemists, a type of photoreaction that damages the cell. And it's not too dissimilar from the mechanism of getting skin cancer. So unfortunately, nature is very efficient at this photoreaction. So I said, how can I use this? And so I started making polymers with thymine hanging off of it. And I found out that it's a photoresist. And I can curl hair with it. You know those carnival lights that you click and they glow? You take this solution, you put it in your hair, you wrap it around, you click the light, and your hair stays curly. I can hold pleats and make wrinkle-resistant fibers from completely non-toxic, environmentally benign aqueous polymers by using this technology. We have, here's a crazy story. On June 29th, 2015, I found myself on the center stage of the United Nations General Assembly. There's my big head over there. So what happened? So 14 days earlier, you know the show on cable TV, Whale Wars? They called me up. They said, John, we've just run aground this evil, bad fisher people doing evil, bad things, and we have 75 tons of this illegal fishing net. We only got 2 weeks. They sent a bunch of it to me. I had to come up with a way of separating the nylon from the polypropylene, pulling out the metals, pulling out the pigments. It had to be extruded to a specific dimension. I didn't have the extruder, so overnight I downloaded on the web the plans and I built the extruder. I sent it to Germany, to Adidas, and standing beside me in the central stage of the United Nations General Assembly, chairman of the board of Adidas and I holding up the 2016 running shoe made out of ocean plastics. That was invented at WBI in 14 days. We have an electronics recycling technology. The orange growers, about 5 years ago, the US EPA declared orange oil a skin irritant. So there used to be all products that were always orange scented and then they vanished. It's because of this declaration of the skin irritation. So the orange goes, oh my God, what are we going to do? And so I was thinking, and again, I can't explain why I think of these things, but I took limonene and I hydrolyzed it 50% in an aqueous solution, and then I probe sonicated dispersed it, so that if I grind up a lithium cobalt battery, I can get exactly the right density to separate out the lithium cobalt. We have 2 pilot plant operations now going on where we completely 100% recover the lithium cobalt from lithium batteries using orange oil and water instead of explosive hydrocarbons. We have a water harvesting technology where we have these polymers that when the light shines, the polymer absorbs water. When the light goes down, it releases water. And so we have this capture and release process where we can either do it in passive solar or in the shadow of a windmill in the millisecond time frame. So in very arid environments, we can harvest water. We have a BPA-free can lining technology. The idea here is that I don't think we're any smarter or any better. We have a cash register receipt, of course, but we're not any smarter or better than any other group of scientists. What we got to understand here is everyone lives in constraints. Constraints is not something that hurts. You know, people say, oh, green chemistry, it's going to slow us down. I don't feel very slow. What I've just described to you is part of 4 years of work of only 20% of our efforts at the Institute. Okay? It's a pretty impressive track record. But the thing is, it's not special. If I had a group of scientists, and I said to a group of scientists, you can never use a molecule that starts with the letter D. That's kind of silly, but why would I do that? But they would have to think differently. If everyone's taking the same classes, reading the same journals, going to the same conferences, everyone's doing the same thing, not using the letter D just makes you do things different. But that's silly, the letter D. Why not instead approach a project using the principles of green chemistry? No one else is. And so the competitive advantage is we're not successful in spite of green chemistry, but the magic here is we're successful because of it. And so most companies have active green chemistry programs because they get the commercial benefits. But why I'm here today, and what I want to close with, is in this beautiful 42,000 square foot facility, there is over here in the corner Beyond Benign. This is the nonprofit dedicated to changing the way we teach, learn, and do chemistry through K through 12, university, and through society. And that, to me, is the most important thing that I do. All right? And so Beyond Benign has K through 12 curriculum, community engagement, and things like that. And the idea here is if we go back to my story, you know, how many times do we put people in little boxes? And we say, you're an artist, you're a chemist, you're a scientist. Man, we got to stop doing that. We got to start looking at things through a different lens. And so one of the things I love to do is I go to art museums and I give talks on creativity and innovation. I'll take my piano and I'll play a diminished seventh chord. And people go, oh. And then I'll play a major seventh chord and they go, huh. And I say, you know, if I didn't play the diminished seventh chord first, you would accuse me of playing elevator music. It would be boring. That good music creates tension and then release. And it pulls on our tension and release. And that's part of the underpinnings of music. Now, interestingly enough, every chemist knows what we call the reaction coordinate diagram. Every chemical reaction goes through tension and release. Who would have ever thought that a musician and a chemist could sit at a table and compare the way they approach things? We celebrate when a biologist collaborates with a chemist. Please, we need to start crossing these boundaries in much bigger ways. One of the coolest things that happened is I spoke at University of Virginia several years ago. And about a year later, a professor from the University of Virginia music department called me up and said, John, you changed everything for me. And he composed a suite of music called The Principles of Green Chemistry. And what we do now is we go out and gig. I get up, I give this talk or something like it. Then he comes up on stage, and we banter back and forth about jazz and classical music. A jazz musician will say, when I perform jazz and I'm improvising, I have to think of what I'm going to write when I play. I got to execute it. I got to harmonize. I got to tempo. I got to do everything at the same time. But when I play classical music, I just got to not screw up. We don't have jazz in chemistry. We teach chemistry as if all you got to do is know what the precedent is. And we need to enable that self-esteem to say, no, let's improvise. Let's innovate. Let's create. And then a 17-piece swing band gets up and plays the Principles of Green Chemistry. It's kind of cool. My father-in-law was the athletic director at St. Anselm's up in New Hampshire. So one day he goes, what do you chemists do anyways? So I explained to him, we take a molecule and we want to do a reaction with the molecule. But the problem is that there's too many oxygens. So we put a protecting group over here and then we do the reaction like that. It's kind of like this, Dad. And I put up one of his soccer plays. It's his soccer play. And I say, there's the defense, there's the offense, there's the thing. And I say, we think of putting ourselves in so many little buckets when human behavior and molecular behavior have a small conserved group of things that we can actually wrap ourselves around and understand. And we got to start looking at collaboration in a very different way, because if we keep doing things the way we've always done it, we're going to get the same results. And so why I'm here so passionate to talk to you guys is that my dream is to talk to you about the Green Chemistry Commitment. This is a program that Beyond Benign does where we're asking chemistry department chairs and deans to say, okay, well, we don't really have the curriculum to do this. We don't have the resources to do this, but it is so important. We're going to commit to trying. And if we can join a group of other universities that are trying to do it and share best practices, maybe we'll have a single class. Maybe we'll add it to the organic labs. Maybe we'll have a seminar series. What could be more important than finding a way to do this? And so this commitment, we've got now over 50 signers of this commitment now. And the reason that I'm here, one of the reasons is to meet you and talk to you, but I'm hoping my next presentation, there's another logo up here. You guys have everything you need. You have faculty that are inspired and gifted and get this. There are not many universities that I can say, this is easy for you. You've got the right people. You've got the right infrastructure. This is just putting a pen on a piece of paper. Your students are passionate. They get it. Your faculty is passionate. They get it. Let's do it. Thank you.
Well, as I promised you, the Grand Seminar brings scientists here who will challenge you and inspire you. I'm pretty sure you are being challenged and inspired by this talk. So with that, I would like to, if you have any questions, please. Mm-hmm. There's a microphone there.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. I'd like to present a situation and get your feedback about it, which is recently I read that, in this case, a lot of work in dietary science, which obviously bridges biology and chemistry, that as a result of the constantly changing recommendations, so a sense of what is hazardous, what is not, that people in general have lost a certain confidence in science. So, how do you address that, or that question of the unintended consequence, or the question of we don't know what we don't know?
Well, when it comes to things like toxins in the environment, the red dyes and the things like that, every city, every state, every country has these groups of people talking about chemicals policy. But what's interesting is there's never a chemist on those boards. There's never a chemist in that group. And I would argue, because the field of chemistry has evolved, that we don't see that as part of who we are. We've kind of been left out, or we have chosen not to be there. Now, if the only people in the world who are taught the impacts of molecular structure and how that impacts behavior aren't part of the conversation, who are making all these things? So if we have this as part of the curriculum, then chemists will feel comfortable being part of that, and there'll be a day in the future when there are higher quality decisions being made. But right now, the reason these decisions are so wacky is because they're not based on mechanistic chemistry, because we chemists aren't showing up. That's why this is so important. So I don't care if people become chemists, if they understand the role of chemistry in the thing, and when they're on the panels, when they're on the boards, when they pick the products that they're buying in the stores, we got to up the game. And it's just not part of our curriculum right now. Okay.
So it's been about 20 years since Green Chemistry Theory and Practice came out, and there's been a lot of research in chemistry since then. So if you were to rewrite the book right now, is there a 13th principle that you would add, or a subdiscipline that you would highlight in a new edition of the book?
So that's an interesting question. And again, I'm the wrong person, because obviously I have an overabundance of bias with that question. But people have come for 20 years saying, aha, you forgot this. And I always say, no, actually, it's over there, and they walk away agreeing. Or they say, why don't you combine these two? And I say this way. So I have become an expert at rationalizing this. But is that the magical way? Had someone else written it and came up with 9, would that be as effective, or 23? Of course. It's just an arbitrary tool. But the thing that's most important to me right now is 20 years ago, no one knew what green chemistry was. It was nothing, and no one heard of it. About 10 years ago, I would say most universities started to have a couple people interested. Now, there's not one university that I'm aware of on the planet that doesn't have passionate 1 or 2 faculty that kind of identify with green chemistry. There are now over 10, 15 textbooks. There are 7 journals. There are all kinds of workshops. So the field of green chemistry is now defined. It's not the time to go back and, change that. Could it have been better in a different way? Of course. But we're kind of stuck 20 years later. Let's just do it. And so yeah, absolutely. I'm happy with the way it is. I wouldn't go back and change anything, because I'm kind of where I wish it was faster. I wish I could find a way to catalyze this movement a little bit faster, but it's happening. The 50 signers of the, in 5 years, I think I'm going to have them all. I don't think there's going to be any universities that won't sign within 5 years, and so we just got to make it happen sooner. And those universities that sign first will historically always be the universities that were early. Yeah.
I'm old enough that way back when things were less sophisticated, there was a TV commercial, I think it was from DuPont, and they used to say, better living through chemistry. And now, of course, they had to stop that, because otherwise people would say, what you really need is more cancer through chemistry. So I'm just standing up here to thank you for kind of getting to reverse that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And That's one of the big concerns I have. There are several products now on the market. Burt's Bees sells a sunscreen that has printed on it chemical-free. If you buy that product, what are you putting on yourself? An idea? Chemicals are stuff. And so the fact that companies are exploiting this is terrifying to me. And we should be outraged. It means that we chemists are not doing a good job teaching people that everything is chemicals and that it's not chemicals that we should be concerned about. It's toxic chemicals. And we have the power and the ability to do. There's no law that says a red dye has to cause cancer. If we understand the mechanism of cancer, we can make a red dye that doesn't.
Hi. So my question is just, with the green chemistry commitment, you speaking about your experience and not really knowing a lot about chemistry until higher ed, what does it look like to have green chemistry introduced in K to 12 and even here? What is that program like?
So, and again, right now, there's a lot of people in education that want to go to a middle school or a high school and light things on fire and say, this is chemistry. And I'm 55. That worked for me. I didn't get inspired to go into chemistry, but I said, ooh, that's cool. But now, a Game Boy is so much more impressive than that little bit of fire in front of the classroom. It doesn't really work. But I believe that if you go to a middle school or a high school and say, the world has problems, and we need you to invent solutions to those problems. And the only way you're going to do that is to master the sciences and become a world-class practitioner. That all of a sudden motivates people to get it and to do well. And so what we have found is that what Beyond But 9 does is there's over 250 lesson plans that are free, not in PDF, in Word format that teachers can download that are cross-referenced to the state standards, so that when a teacher has to teach something, they can download it. It teaches that, and subversively, the illustrative examples talk about sustainability, but it gives meaning now when you're learning trigonometry and you're looking at deforestation. Now there's a reason to know trigonometry, and what we've found is that students are passionately engaged in these kinds of issues, and when you correlate what they're learning to these issues, their performance goes through the roof. And then they consider those careers when they get old. Statistics say that if a student by the 8th grade has not had a positive experience with sciences, they'll never go into it. So we want to make sure that they have those positive experiences and believe that they can make a difference, because they can.
You've worked at some really different places, from big company to being a professor to essentially, it sounds like, running a whole bunch of different startups now.
Yeah.
So can you describe what those different experiences have been like, and maybe what would you do next that would be a whole nother
everyone's
thing?
scared because I spent 10 years at Polaroid, 10 years at UMass, 10 years at WBI. So there's a pattern here. But it's interesting. If anyone ever asked me any time in my life what I'd be doing in 5 years, I would have always been wrong. And I think that's for the students that are graduating, thinking that the decisions that they make about where they're going to graduate school and what they're going to do, we're in a world where none of that really matters. That you redefine yourself every day, and it's the skills of how to learn that's important, but what you do. So who knows what I'm going to do in the next few years. I know if I try to plan it, I'll just be wrong, so I don't bother. I've never applied for a job in my life. So it's just flotsam and jetsam since I was 14. Just people have offered me jobs, and I wouldn't even know how to think about what I'm going to do. I just wait for it to happen, I guess.
Okay, so maybe we're going to go for the last question.
Good evening. First of all, thank you for coming. I was wondering if you could talk about green cleaning products and maybe some recommendations for brands, because there's a lot out there, but I'm trying to find some that are effective. And
So it's a really important thing. So one of the things is, in the pharmaceutical industry, we have all of our knowledge of toxicity comes from the pharmaceutical industry. Because when you have a drug that cures people, you must do a phase 1 clinical trials to assess the toxicity and the side effects. So in pharmaceuticals, we have a moral and ethical requirement to submit them to humans. And so then what we talk about is not the toxicity, not the efficacy, but the therapeutic index, the ratio of what it does good versus what it does bad. In all other aspects of chemistry, we don't have the numerator. We only have you can't feed humans paint to see how they react. God thinks that we don't have that kind of a world, hopefully. All right, and so we have to work on subjectivity. Cleaners is the next best thing, because with cleaners, there is a health impact. If you don't clean something, you can get sick. And so that is why many companies are working on it. But the problem, I would argue, is the way that we define cleaning. Right now, that's a need for government policy, because right now, what it means to be a disinfectant, what it means to be all the different classes of cleaners, has to do with log kill of microbes. And I would argue that the development of resistance is based on that mentality of log kill. If you can create a cleaner that is a bacteriostat instead of a bactericide, the world is a much better place. But the regulatory world has no capacity to deal with that because we need to see log kill. If the things are never growing in the first place, it doesn't. And so here is a place where we need to address regulatory issues on how we define and look at these things so that we can become more sustainable. And there's so many examples of that. So right now I've got to say, there aren't a lot of examples. You know, I'm not an advertiser here. You know, there's some products that Method makes is really good. Some of the products at Seventh Generation are good. You know, it depends on the type of things that you're doing. There's no one size fits all. Yeah.
Well, please join me to thank Dr. Warner once more.
I'm sorry you don't have a voice. Is it hurt? Okay.